Hello, David Clarke here from DVC Training. In the first video about Pinokio, I looked at setting it up and then my first result. In this second video, I'm going to be going a bit more in-depth into the settings, trying to point out some of the potential problems with it, and also comparing the results with Flash to those that I get with my favourite AI upscaling program, which is Topaz Video, which of course you have to pay for, whereas Flash VSR is free. Okay, so let's have a quick look into the different settings that I glossed over earlier. Now again, a lot of them probably just leave as they come out the box, but there are a couple that I fiddle with. Obviously, along the top here, we've got the option to do video, do imaging, or fiddle with this toolbox. Didn't find very much inside of here, which was very useful. Don't do image scaling up here because I'm concentrating on video. But obviously, if you want to do a still image, you can pop it in there and then try and upscale it with this stuff. But mainly I'm concentrating on Flash, and obviously I've got the option between single and batch. So I've been doing one video at a time, but I could load a whole bunch of clips up and get it to do them all at once. The only problem you might get with batch videoing is how long each individual clip is, but I'll talk about that in a second. Obviously, you load up your clip there. This is where it pops out. You've got your output folder. All that stuff is fairly obvious. But if we move down, we've got various options. So the first one here, video pre-processing. I had a go at that. Didn't really find it did much good, so I ignored it. Some people say it's actually better to downscale it first, so make it smaller and then upscale it by a lot. So halve it maybe, and then upscale it by 4 as opposed to upscaling it by 2. So you'd open that up and you'd decide what size you're going to make it by going to resize and sticking in a number, and then it would make a smaller version for you. Now, personally, I didn't think it came out better, but that's what this section is for. You can also trim it, so you can set a start and end point, so you only do a bit of the video. Again, I tend to make the videos up in advance, ready to upscale, so I don't bother to use that side of it. Then we come down here, where we've got stuff like pipeline mode, model version, seed, random seed, and all this sort of thing. Again, I tend to leave these as they are. This one here, there are two models, basically. So the model is the thing that's doing all the work. And it's been programmed with a lot of stuff, so it can look at a piece of video and recognize it and then upscale it accordingly. And there's a tiny version and a full version. The full version should do better quality because it'll have more information in the model. But as it says, the full version requires 24 plus gigabytes of VRAM. I'm only using a 5060 Ti and it's only got 16 gig of VRAM. So if I try doing that, it just puts up an error. I've been using Tiny for everything. I did try it on a graphics card, so it was a 4090, which was a £2,000 graphics card when it came out, and I tried the full version. It seemed to take a bit longer. It seemed to be slightly better, but I can't afford a graphics card with that amount of RAM, so I've been using Tiny. And on the model version, it says use 1.1. Yeah, I have been using 1.1. I didn't see much point in using version 1.0 because 1.1 logically is going to be better. Maybe I'll try it sometime. This seed thing is all to do with the way that it generates stuff. And again, I leave it as it is on randomized seed. And I could go into great length about how AI stuff does things in the background, but it's not worth it. Just leave it on randomized seed. You could take it off of that and then use the same seed for every time you're upscaling something. If it's on randomized seeds, basically I could do that and it'll produce one result. If I did it again, it'll produce a slightly different result. If I was to use the same seed, it should produce the same result every time. But the differences will be subtle, and to be honest, I haven't bothered to compare them. The things I do fiddle with are this lot: upscale factor, tile size, tile overlap, and process as chunks. Upscale, how much do you want to upscale it? 2 times, 3 times, or 4 times? And it says it's trained for 4 times, so that's the one that should give the best results. Which is why one of the reasons why you might want to downscale it first. So if I try to take a piece of standard definition and then I upscale it by 4 times, I'm going to make something that's about 8K. And I need something that's about 8K. And it's going to take extra time to do it because it's going to 8K. But that's what it says. It says 4 times is what it was trained on. Now, personally, I've stuck with 2 or 3. 2 will take standard f4x3 and stick it on an HD screen with black bars down the side. 3 will give you something which will be a bit bigger than HD. So if you want to try widescreening it, it'll fill the whole thing up. So I tend to do 3. Now, tile size, I would tend to leave this as the default. Because there's not enough memory on your graphics card, it has to split the picture up into squares or tiles. And that's saying how big each tile will be. The more tiles it makes, the longer it takes to process. So ideally, you'd pop that up. But on the other hand, if you pop that up, it's going to use more memory, and memory on the graphics card, the VRAM, is the thing that this runs out of and gives an error. So I've been using that pretty much for most things. I did find if I was doing a 2x scale on a standard definition clip and I put it to 512, for me on my graphics card, it worked. And it also made it a bit faster. So I have sometimes changed that to 512. I've been doing it in variations of 256, 512 is twice that amount. I haven't been putting in random effects, and I haven't really played with this too much. You could try sticking it up to 512 if you're doing standard def and you're upscaling by 2 times. If you get it wrong, it'll come up with an error. The tile overlap. So obviously if it does a square and then another square and then another square, it could make slight differences between the squares because it's doing them all individually. And if they overlap a bit, then it will smooth it out. And I did find when I tried something that wasn't 256 or 512, I tried 352, and I didn't change that 24 to match something that would go with 352. I actually got vertical and horizontal lines around the image. In other words, it just messed it up completely. So again, I would say if you're going to fiddle with this, try 256. If you run out of VRAM, try 128. If you have still got lots of VRAM when you're doing 56, try 512. Don't try variations in between, otherwise you might end up with horizontal and vertical stripes. This is the other one I use quite a lot, which is process as chunks. So as I said, it takes that, whacks it onto your graphics card, does the upscaling, and produces the final movie. To upscale stuff, it's got to put the entire clip into the memory of your graphics card. So again, I've got 16 gig of RAM. It can only fit so much in there. Now, by trial and error, I've pretty much worked out it's about 5 or 6 seconds. For me, if I have 5 or 6 seconds worth of video, I can do it without doing it as chunks. If I've got 10 seconds of video, it tries to load it up, it takes forever, and it comes up with an error because it can't get all of that stuff into the graphics card. So it starts using the computer memory and then it goes horribly wrong and then it comes up with an error. So you can't do long clips as one lump. You've got to chop them up. And what it does here is it chops it up for you. So if you click on process as chunks, it opens up this thing and it says it's going to chop it up into 5-second chunks. So the first thing you do when you click the button, it'll actually make the chunks up, and then it'll do one chunk, then another chunk, then another chunk, then another chunk. And that works, and you can do really long videos. The only problem is, as you finish off one chunk and then it starts another chunk, there might be a slight disturbance in the picture. So let's take this video for example. Again, this is high 8 stuff that was put onto VHS and outscaled, so it's pretty naff to start off with, and it has improved it, and it's not perfect, but it has improved it. So if you watch this, as you start playing that, about 5 seconds in, there. It goes from this shot to that. There is a very slight change looking here and look at the background, not look at what's moving, look at the background. And you can see a slight change in stuff which shouldn't be changing at all because only the people are moving. And that's the result of a chunk. There's another one very much towards the end of this. So if I let it play for a bit more, you get to about 10 seconds and there, another one. Now, if there's a lot going on screen, you don't notice it, but that's what chunking does. Now, to get around this, I have done things like go to my original tape and actually chopped it up into individual shots and saved out each shot as a clip. And since, particularly if I'm doing a drama, an individual shot doesn't generally last more than about 5 seconds, I've not had to chunk them. Now, the other thing I have tried, because I do own Resolve Studio, is coming to the color page and go to the temporal noise reduction and put that on better and whack it up a bit. And then if you play that, so here we go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's still there, just not quite as noticeable, because that temporal noise reduction does help to reduce it a bit. Tried a similar thing with Neat Video, and again it helps, it doesn't make it perfect. But that's one limitation of it. You have to chunk it up, and there might be a slight disturbance at chunks. On the other side here, you've got your output folder. So if you want to know where it's actually gone, click on the output folder and it'll tell you, and it'll open it up in Windows, and you can go to where your files have been saved and then you can move them somewhere else. But a bit further down here, then you have advanced options. So right down here, I've got this stuff, the sparse ratio and the local range and this cache. It does explain what they all do, and I've generally left them at the defaults. One thing I did think when I was looking at it very, very closely is that the temporal consistency, you know, the differences between frames could be a bit better. So I have tried popping this up a bit higher and seeing what happens and taking it down a bit lower. I wasn't happy with the results. When I whacked this up too much, I thought it became a bit too fuzzy. Again, you can play with that if you want to. The same with these here. I've played with them. I thought they came out about the same. You can try it out yourself. I thought it was simplest to leave them as they are. The output video quality. Now this is making an MP4 file, like I said. MP4 files are compressed. So ideally I'd make this as a much less compressed file. I like to make either still images or ProRes. It won't let me do that. So I want to make something that's less compressed, because once you start compressing something, you introduce nonsense into it, which may cause you a problem later on. This will let you whack up the quality so you create less nonsense, if you like. You compress it less. Like it says, balanced is sort of an average value. If you got to 8 or 9, it's near to lossless, but the files are bigger. I prefer to do that just so I lose as little as possible. Changing this didn't seem to make any difference as to whether my editing programs got on with it or not. So I tend to put it up a bit higher on the basis that nearer lossless is better than leaving it at 5. But that's the one here I would fiddle with. I don't really fiddle with anything else. Then you've got these other ones down here. Again, they're just different variations of models. Again, I've left these at the default. You can try the other options if you want to. Again, just do a small clip and see what it looks like. But I've generally found I preferred those two that are there as the default. Over this side, you've got the output frames per second, which did worry me when I looked at it, because I thought, oh, does this only do 30 frames a second? But no, it says ignores it for video files. So you can ignore that unless you're bunging in a bunch of still images. And on this thing here, on the device, you can change this so it's going to use your processor. Or CUDA 1, CUDA 2, I'm assuming that maybe means you have 2 different graphics cards. I left it on auto. I also like this one, enable color fix. Like it says, it fixes color shifts during upscaling. It produces slightly different color, very, very slightly different color to the sort of thing that I get in Topaz. I actually prefer it, so I leave that one on. And then down here, again, tiled VAE, left that one on. You could try turning it off, but because it's all to do with VRAM, again, you might run out of RAM and have error written at the top. And this one here might help you a little bit if you are running out of RAM. Tick that, and it will free up some RAM, like it says. I haven't bothered to try it because it's slower and this is slow enough already, but you might try ticking that. But mainly here, I fiddle with that one and I ignore all the rest. Now we get down to here where you can get a comparison video between the two. So this is the original fuzzy standard def one, and that's the version it's just created. And I did this 3 times. It's actually pretty good. Okay, something peculiar around his hand. You look close enough, you'll see rubbish everywhere, but bear in mind how rubbish it was in the first place. That is really quite staggeringly better. Not perfect, but quite staggeringly better than that. By the way, if you want to play this stuff, what you've actually got to do is you click on the image and it starts playing it. And then click on the image and it stops playing. It doesn't have play buttons. It's just, you have to do that. And then down under settings, I mean, you can select a theme, so it can just look slightly different. All that does is just change what the look of the screen is like. But there's this one here. I have been leaving it at going out onto the C drive, but you could have your outputs going to a different folder on a different drive, which I would normally suggest I would do, but because all the temporary stuff still goes on the C drive, I still need C drive with an awful lot of space. You can't change the temporary directory in here easily. You can probably get to it through the settings or something, but in this interface, you can't change it easily. So because of that, I've just been letting the final output go to the same directory and then just copying it or moving it out of there when I'm finished. Now you can do videos as batches. All you got to do is either click on that and find your videos or just drop them in like it says. And then all the settings down here are exactly the same as they would be for videos not in batches. So that does mean if you've got 5 or 6 videos or 20 or 30 or 200, you can whack them all in there and let it do it all overnight, which is brilliant. The only thing is this max chunk duration, which is down here and ticked under me batch processing, doesn't seem to work when you do batch processing. Maybe it'll change in a future version, but right now, if I was to drop a bunch of files in there and amongst that files there's some 10 or 15 second clips, it would do all the ones it can manage and the others would just error out. So at the end of the day, you'd have most of them done and the big ones not. Now, of course, for you, you might find that getting to a big file means the whole thing just gums up completely and doesn't complete the rest of it. So what I have been doing when I've been putting a whole bunch of clips in to batch process them, I've been going to the folder full of stuff and putting it into details view and then getting this column length up. So it's not there as a default. To get it, all you got to do is right click, go to more, and look through here until you get to length. I generally click the L key until I get there, and then I'll tick length. And that tells you how long your clips are. So I can tell that 24-second clip, if I bung that in a batch file, that's going to fail completely because it needs to be chunked. It can't cope with 24 seconds. These 6 seconds ones, maybe. But the 24 seconds one, you're stuffed. It won't work. These ones here, yeah, well, the 8s and 9s, 14s, possibly won't get through those without actually chunking it. And if I do chunk it, then I've got to do it one clip at a time. The other thing worth mentioning about the directories is if I open the output folder, it'll bring it up here, tells me where all the outputs are going. So in this case, it's on the C drive, and there's the one that it's just made up. If I pop back a directory and go to the temp folder, this is where all the temporary stuff is. So whenever I load up a clip, it puts a copy of the clip in here, and then it does all the chunks which are in here, and then it makes up a final file, and then once it's made the final file, it puts it in the output folder. But you will actually find that there are some of these files that it's made up. Like that is the one that I've just made up. That is the same as it is in the output folder. So there's one there and one in the output folder. So if for some reason things go horribly wrong, you can always look in the temp file and see if there's anything here that you can use. They are named sensibly, so obviously that's the original clip name, which goes up to 22. And then it says tiny, which is the model. And then it says S3, as in scale 3. And then it says chunk, meaning you chunked it, you chopped it up. And then, of course, you got the date it was actually done. That's what these names mean. So you can tell here, these are all ones that have been done because they've got different scaling values. They've got chunked on them, like that was S2, that was S3. And then here you might have the original files in all this stuff. Of course, this will start filling up with crap, so sooner or later you've got to delete it. You don't have to come here to delete it. You can literally go here and say clear temp files and it'll get rid of a lot of them. Other thing worth mentioning is sometimes I've started doing stuff and it's popped up with an error here, and I find that just plain irritating. So if it's doing something, let me pop in another clip. Let's go to 4 times, which it says is its best results. So you started doing something and it's going off, you realize you've made a horrible mistake, you've got the settings wrong or something like that. You can click on that button to stop it. It stops it, gets back to this. You can start it again. Sometimes for me that hasn't worked, so literally I've just turned off Pinokio and then started it again and then started Flash VR again. But that's useful. You can actually just click the thing and say stop whilst it's doing things. So obviously in the last video I showed you the differences between what I'm going to Flash VR and the original. Now let's compare it to Topaz. Obviously, biggest difference between Flash VR and Topaz is you have to pay for Topaz. And there are 2 different tiers. So you have Topaz Studio and Topaz Studio Pro. Now the biggest difference between the two is that if you go for the Pro version, they have a very good version of upscaling called Starlight. There's a Starlight Mini and a Starlight Sharp. I happen to prefer the Starlight Mini. But to get the Starlight, you've got to go to this version. And as you can see, that is $67 a month. Can't find out on the website how to shove these prices into pounds, but never mind. $67 a month, $800 a year. Otherwise, you use this version, which is the same, but just doesn't have that Starlight model, which is $400 a year, $33 a month. And if you stop paying for it, it stops working. So quite a difference between that and free. But it does, in my opinion, give the best results overall of everything that I have tried. It doesn't mean there's something out there that I haven't tried. It's also very good. But out of all the stuff that I've tried, and I've tried a lot, to me, Topaz, particularly Topaz Starlight, the expensive one, gives me the best results. So how does Flash compare? So first of all, let's look at what you would get if you didn't have Starlight. So without Starlight, there's a whole bunch of models. My preferred one is a thing called Iris. And here, this is the results out of Iris. This is the results out of Flash. So same shots as we looked at last time. There's just me sitting here, which is from DV. There's this stuff, which is some 8mm old video stuff, which has got a lot of countryside, is always very hard to upscale. Another variation of that. And then this shot, which is VHS-C, and then this shot here, which is on high 8. So if you look at the results of that, the DV one, I'm thinking they're fairly close. If you look really closely at some of the details on screen here, and it jumps as it loops around and plays the same thing for you, but then look at the details on the keyboard, Topaz has generated some gubbins on there, which this hasn't, But overall, I'd say they're pretty similar. I do like the fine detail that Iris produces, whereas everything else produces slightly more blobby detail. But honestly, those two, to me, pretty similar. If you look at the countryside shots, now the trees here are really hard for AI to deal with. I've had lots of problems trying to get good looking trees with these kind of shots. It's low res, there's lots of detail in it, but it's fuzzy detail. So it's trying to create it from nothing, particularly when there's no leaves on the trees, maybe. Hasn't been trained on trees in the autumn. So Flash obviously goes for as sharp as possible. I tweaked the settings inside of Iris. So I put in a bit more noise reduction because it's a pretty noisy shot, and fiddled with the settings a bit. And that's, of course, one thing you can do with Topaz. If you try some settings and they don't work, you can tweak it and preview it and tweak it and preview it till you get something that you actually like. That's not something you can do with Flash. With Flash, that's what it does. With Topaz, you can fiddle with it. And there are other models to try. So if Iris doesn't work very well on a particular shot, you can try Proteus, you can try some of the others. But if I start that playing, even though there are some weird things going on in the background here, I do prefer the results from Flash with that shot. You get to the shot here with me, there's definitely more definition on the face and the hair than there is with just Iris. Same kind of thing with this one. Now, I don't like some of the extra blobbiness and sharpness going on around here, which I don't have in this one, but on the other hand, that looks pretty posterized. There's no definition at all in the faces. And there's even a little bit of warping going on around me. That's because I've put on a lot of heavy noise reduction on there, because it's a pretty noisy shot in the first place. Of course, comparing it to the original, that's the original. It's a really blurred, fuzzy shot in the first place. So that's an improvement. I think Flash is overall better. Still room for quite a bit of improvement there. But these two shots of this countryside, I do find are really things that don't upscale very well at all. If I go to the next one, now this is a shot of me from a VHS-C early camera, JVC I think it was, and honestly, they're both pretty awful. Out of those, I'm hard pushed to think which one I think is best. The Flash one obviously has tried to put more detail in the buildings. Not sure it works. I think maybe fuzzy buildings are better, I'm not sure. But it's mainly me. Obviously, your eyes are drawn to the focus of the shot, and I'm not sure. I think they're both fairly naff. You come to this one, which is the one with lots of fast movement, and honestly, looking between the two of those, can't say I actually come up with a preference. I think they're both fairly similar. On a pause, you can see Flash has added in more details around my eyes than this one has, but overall, if that thing's moving rapidly, does it make much difference? Of course, Flash is still adding in its jump every 5 seconds as the thing got chunked up, which Topaz doesn't do. I mean, that's another advantage of using something like Topaz. They are in the background doing the same kind of thing that Flash is doing. They're chopping the video up into smaller bits, chopping it up into squares, processing it, putting it back together. But they do more work to make sure it's what they call temporally consistent. In other words, it doesn't change too much over time. Plus, they have sliders where you can tweak. Plus, they have support. So if you have problems, you can actually contact the support. If you're trying to get some help with Flash, which is free, you basically have to search the internet and go on user forums. And the support there is variable. I see loads of people saying Flash is the best thing since sliced bread. I say, well, I'm getting this. And they say, oh, no, you're not. You get better support if you're going for a paid for program. So anyway, that's the sort of thing I'd get if I was using the regular version of Topaz. Let's have a look at what you get with the Pro version. So with the Pro version, you get this thing called Starlight. There's 2 versions of Starlight, Starlight Sharp and Starlight Mini. I'm using Starlight Mini, which is the one that takes a lot longer, but I think does the better results. I also think it's best with that to take the footage, upscale it by 3 times, and then I'll take the results and I'll whack it through Iris as well. So I'll put it a second time through Topaz, so it goes through 2 lots, because I think that gives better results. Starlight takes an awful lot longer to go through, takes probably twice as long as going through Flash. And then of course I put Iris on top, which adds another layer of processing. So it takes time, but I think for me, that gives me generally the best results for everything that I've done in Topaz. As of right now, who knows what they're going to invent in the future. So I'm comparing Flash to Mini scaled 3 times and then rescaled with Iris and a bit more enhancement. So that's Starlight on that side, results of Topaz Mini on this side. If I was to compare that to just Mini on its own, that's what Mini looks like on its own. That's what it looks like with a bit of Starlight added. So I think that's a better result. Now, we've still got a little bit of gubbins going on in the keys here, which we could possibly live without. But on the other hand, look at the details in the hair, say the details in the buttons. I just think that gives a little bit more refined result than that. With this shot, pretty close, to be honest. I think more noticeable on some of the other shots. So let's go to a wood shot. So again, this is obviously the flash one, this is the mini one. Now what we had before with Iris was a lot of nonsense going on here. This hasn't come out too well at all, to be honest. I much prefer the look of the flash one to that one. Maybe when we get close, I don't know. I honestly think that face looks better than that one. We go to the external shot, and again you still have this thing that I don't like, the look of the trees here, although the distance actually looks a bit better. And if you start that playing, obviously it's tried to make something out of whatever was on this guy's t-shirt. I do know it wasn't a bunch of binary or whatever that appears to be. Out of the two, definitely I'd say that one is better. But again, slightly too sharp. Maybe that will be improved if I put a little bit of a slight blur on it. Whereas this has gone completely doodle-alley. I mean, that doesn't look real at all. Looks like some kind of surreal dreamscape. So in that case, probably I'd say Flash is winning. But then look at this shot. Now this was the shot that was originally that VHS-C, filmed in 1998. Start playing it, and I'd say the Starlight one wins hands down. I mean, this is sharper. The halo was there in the first place, but it's enhanced the halo. It's added in lots of extra sharp details, which, yeah, it's just a bit too much. This, for me, Starlight's winning hands down. And Starlight's done that and made that shot into much better and more acceptable than that. And, of course, much better than the original of that. And there you can see what the AI really does. The AI looks at that and says, well, that's an eye, that's some teeth. Let's put some teeth in there. And so it puts in teeth based on what it thinks teeth looks like. Eyes which match that shape. Hair which is vaguely similar. But yeah, that, to me, that is Starlight proving how good it can be on some shots. Go to this one. Now this is the one with lots of fast movement. You still get your dropouts. That doesn't get fixed by any of them. But in this case, I definitely think Starlight has done a better job than the other one. Although you are having to look quite closely to see it, but as I jump over the hill there, I think it just holds together more as the thing's moving than Flash. Although, you might say, difference is not huge. Now obviously this is only an example of about 5 different shots. I have done loads of different shots, and overall, I do think I prefer Starlight and Iris, because I think Flash possibly overdoes it a little bit too much. On the other hand, it does a flipping good job for free, which is a lot better than £800 a year. The other advantage you get with Topaz is you get an interface where you have sliders that say things like sharpness and de-blur. And there's lots of other options in there as well. There's some good slow motion stuff as well. There's different models you can try out. So I've only showed you Iris here, but they've also got Proteus, which is very good. And they keep adding new ones and they keep developing it. So there's a lot of good things about Topaz. And I do think overall, I think it probably gives me the best results. More along the lines of how that one looks better than that one. Doesn't do everything perfectly, but you're having to pay for it. And that Flash is actually, in a lot of occasions, pretty flipping close. I mean, this is a good example of Topaz has added in detail. There's extra detail here on the hair, which we just simply don't have in there. You can see more little bits of hair on here than you can see in there. Still fluffs up the text. AI, especially if you have blurred text, can do some really weird stuff on text, I have to tell you. And I also think that Topaz is better with really ropey footage, with really bad looking footage, like this kind of stuff. I think it does a better job of rescuing that than something like Flash, which makes it look the same, but still naff. So I do think it has an edge, and it has a price tag to go with it. And of course, these things are going to carry on developing anyway. So just for the hell of it, I thought, well, what happens if I do a bit of Starlight, and then instead of adding Iris, I put it through Flash, and here are the results. So what I did is I put the original clips through Mini. Normally with Mini, I'd upscale it by 3 times. With this, I only did a 2 times upscale, so it's a bit quicker. It took about 10 or 15 minutes to do each of these clips. And then I put it through Flash afterwards. Now this has made stuff which is bigger than high definition. It's come out to 2588 by 1988. So in this case, Edius is now downscaling that to make it into high definition. But this is what you've got is on this side Flash, on this side Mini, and then Flash. Now on this shot, I think that one has the edge because I think the details are a bit finer, but they're pretty close. Come to the trees, and there's a world of difference in these trees. Okay, not necessarily still 100% real, but I think those trees there, that is seriously better than what's going on with these. I do think for some reason my face has got fatter, and of course I then get my flipper every 5 seconds, there is a change on it, but I do think that comes out really very well. Look at this one again. I think what we've got here in all these trees and stuff and in the background here is better than that. So this is Flash versus Mini and Flash. On this shot, of course, Starlight Mini did a really good job of upscaling me in the first place. If I go back to the one which is just Topaz, it's not quite as sharp, but then I think Flash has possibly made a little bit too much extra stuff on there. And in this one, I think the Mini plus Flash one does have an edge. But the biggest difference for me was that the look of these trees here and the grass over that. Now obviously that's the one that's going to take the longest amount of time, and you're going to have to pay for the 800 quid a year for Topaz and also set up Flash. So it's not a definitive answer there. Like I said, my personal opinion is Topaz is better overall with a whole variety of shots than Flash is, but you just have to pay for it and it takes longer. Now, as I mentioned at the start of this video, Pinokio itself is just a front end, which does get at lots and lots of other AI stuff. And there's so much of it I haven't tried at all. I specifically went for Flash because I was interested in upscaling. But there's another thing that I have tried, and I shall do another video on that very shortly, is a program that's actually designed to swap people's faces and do deep fakes. But actually, it's also quite good at colorizing black and white videos. Now, I've talked about that in other things, so I shall do a quick video on that pretty soon. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you get a notification of when that one appears. Hopefully that gives you a good enough introduction so you can go off and try Flash on your own and start using AI to upscale your own videos, all for nothing. Very interested to know what you think of the results. Of course, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, visit my website www.dvctraining.co.uk for more information on all the stuff that I do, and I'll see you in the next video!